I did include some handouts in the email that I sent along with the webinar link. The handout that I sent is going to be far more detailed than the actual webinar, just because the handout is going to walk you through every step of the listing input. And that's something that we don't really have time to do when we're entering a listing in the webinar. So don't overlook that. It is a large document. I believe there are, it's not that big. It's like 20 pages, but it does walk you through every single step. So it's also a good reference to go back and check out after the webinar has ended as well. So we're just going to jump right in. Your best friend when you are about to enter a listing is really happening when you're going on the listing appointment. And that is going to be the profile sheet. So I'm over here, I'm actually on my matrix dashboard, right? And then in the external links widget that you have on your matrix dashboard, you will find all of the data entry sheets. They're referred to as profile sheets in the external links widget. So we're going to be doing an example of a residential listing entry. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that residential profile sheet. Now we're in the process of making this where you guys can fill this in online. So if you're using a tablet when you go out on listing input, or even if you're taking your laptop, however you're working, you'll be able to pull this document up and actually fill it in online. Now you still have to enter the listing into the MLS, but this is your information gathering piece, right? Now you don't have to worry about the legal information. And what I mean by that is like the property ID number and certain other information that I'll show you as we go through that will automatically populate if you use Realist Tax when you enter the listing. And of course, I'm going to show you how to do all of that. But the rest of the document is something that you can have with you. Now, for right now, you need to go ahead and print it out and take it with you on your listing appointment. And you want to fill it out as thoroughly as possible, because half the battle of entering a listing into the MLS is having all of the information, as much information as possible about the listing, making certain that that listing information is accurate. As a listing agent, you are responsible for the content of the listing to ensure that what you're entering is accurate information. So it is best while you're sitting down with your sellers to go through this document. They know what the features of the home are, so they can give these to you. In fact, you can hand this to them, have them fill most of it out, and then you just go over it with them at the end. Once you're done, you've got your listing agreement signed and you're ready to enter this thing into the MLS. Now you've got this thing in front of you, and I promise you, you will speed through the data entry piece a lot quicker. You'll notice it says that the fields that are bold are required. They're not just bold, they're also underlined. So boat dock information, if you're entering boat dock, for example. Anytime you have a listing or information or a field that is required, there's always an out, like you see none right there on approval info, and that's referring to an HOA. So if there's just nothing in that category that matches your listing, then you'll always have none, for example. So there's always something you can enter in those required fields, even if it doesn't apply to your listing. So print this out for now. We are, again, in the process of getting this thing where you can fill it out online, and that will make everything just a whole lot easier for you. All right, so when you're ready, assuming you've got all the data in front of you, so we're going to pretend, right, that we've got that profile sheet filled out. We sat down with our seller and we got that all filled out. When you're ready to enter the listing, you're going to go to Input, and then you're going to select Listing Input. That is going to bring you to this screen. where you will select Add New. And from here, you want to ensure that you're selecting the correct listing input form. From time to time, you may find that you will sell a listing, you will bring a buyer to a listing that was not listed in this MLS, the Florida Gulf Coast MLS, right? So maybe it was listed in the Port Charlotte's MLS, which is Stellar MLS, or some other multiple listing service in the state of Florida. It has to be in the state of Florida. But if you sold a listing, if you took the buyer to a listing and it was not listed in this MLS, you can still enter that listing into our MLS, as long as it's a residential listing. And you would select the residential comp, as in comparable, sold input. So there's two reasons you would want to do that. You would want to enter it for comp purposes, which if it's outside of our MLS area, you may not be that worried about the comp. But the part that might be of interest to you is by entering it into our MLS, even though you're not on the listing side, by entering it into our MLS, you are going to get that statistical credit for the sale. So it will show up when you run your report at the end of the year, when you want to pull your stats for your listings, for not only the listing side but also the sold side. You will have that here in this database as well. So that's the reason you would want to do that, and you would use the comp sold and it's for data entry only. And it does give you that statistical credit for the sale. We are going to use the residential listing input. One question we do get from time to time is sometimes people have a difficult time deciding between the residential income or the residential listing form. And the differences are going to be, for example, if you've got a villa and you're selling the entire building, right? Both sides of the villa, you're selling both sides, and they have to be sold to the same person at one time. That would be a residential income listing. If you're only selling one side of the villa, then you've got a residential listing. And of course, that would go for the triplex or quadruplex and what have you. So keep that in mind. Anytime you're selling the entire building, you've got residential income. You're selling a unit in the building, you've got your residential listing input. So we're going to be doing a single family home. So I'm just going to go ahead and select residential listing input. All right, so you'll notice when you come to this form, once you've selected residential input or any of the other forms that you would select, the next form that you're going to come to is going to be where you're deciding how you're going to enter the information. So the default, you don't have to do anything. It's already selected, is to fill from realist tax. And that's what I highly recommend that you do. Now you can fill from cross property. If you choose to fill from cross property, you want to be really, really careful. When you're filling from cross property, basically what you're doing is you're pulling in information into your listing from the previous listing of the property. So you've got to be really careful because there could have been changes to the property. The previous listing agent could have entered information that has changed or simply just incorrect when they entered it. And of course, I don't think, I'm pretty sure when I say this, that it does not even import the previous listing photos, just to prevent you from accidentally even using another agent's listing photos. But I think it will pull in the previous property description, which is going to be your public information, that information that is seen on all of the consumer facing real estate search sites. So you don't want to use that either. you would want to get rid of that, and you must write your own property description, also known as public remarks. Sometimes you may find that you have to start with a blank listing. Avoid it when you can, and probably 9.5 or 9.9 times even out of 10, you can avoid it. The times that you would have to start with a blank listing can vary, but one of those reasons might be that you're selling a lot that was a tear down structure, and they have built a new structure on the parcel, and it has not yet been given a property ID number. It hasn't been placed on the listing yet by the public, from the public records or the county appraiser's office. So you want to start with a blank listing just because there is no data available. So you have to enter it all manually. But that's a very rare occurrence. And some people that don't know, they just start that way. But you're really missing out if you don't go ahead and choose to fill from realist tax, because when you do, it fills probably 20-25% of the listing form automatically, and it fills in all of that legal information. So you start over here on the left-hand side. You notice this field is yellow. Anytime you see a yellow field anywhere in the matrix system, it means that it is a required field. You have to enter something. So I'm going to go ahead and select Lee County. And then when you get to the right side of this page, less is more. And what I mean by that is you only need to enter a street number and a street name. You do not need to enter the street type. You would want to enter the unit number if you're entering a condo, or even if a villa has a unit number, you would want to enter that because that will narrow down your results, right? Otherwise, you'll see when we go to this next screen, you would have a lot to choose from. So street number and street name, not the street type, and then a unit number if you're entering a condo. And from here, we're going to go to the bottom of the screen and click search. Now, as I mentioned, if you were entering a condo and you didn't enter the lot number, or the unit number, you would have a whole list of items and you would have to look for the correct unit number, right? So by going ahead and entering that, you're avoiding that. So once you get to this screen, you've got your scroll bar down here at the bottom, very bottom of the screen. You can scroll left and right so that you can verify that you've got the correct owner name over here, the correct address. And once everything looks good to you, you see where it says fill over here on the left-hand side. We're just going to go ahead and click fill. And now that brings us to the listing form itself. Now you land on the status tab, and you just want to go ahead and move past that and go ahead and go to the general tab. This is the first tab in the listing form, and you know here that you notice that you see all of this information, the county, the property ID number. We did enter the street address and the street name, but it went ahead and filled in the street type for us. It automatically entered the city, state, zip code. It went ahead and included our geo area and the zoning. And you'll notice it pulled in square footage. So the living square footage and the total square footage, all of that information. And I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see this whole screen. All of this information automatically populated for us because we filled from realist tax. So you can see how this can really save you some time. So you just want to go through here and fill in any blanks that you might see that might be required. So it is the property ID unlisted. That's going to be a no in this case. If you had a pre-direction and for whatever reason it didn't automatically populate, for example, 5226 East Skyline Boulevard, then you could enter that east here. If it comes after the address 5226 Skyline Boulevard East, then of course you could enter the direction here. If you had that unit number and you entered it on the previous screen, it would automatically populate here. And then again, you see the city, state, zip code, geocode, zoning, all of that's filled in for you. Subdivision code automatically populated once I entered the development and the subdivision name. You do need to enter the building design. That does not automatically populate for you. So in this case, we have a single family. So we've got our building design. So that's just, single family, depending on, for condos, you've got low rise, mid rise, high rise. Whether or not, if it's a villa, whether or not it's attached or detached. And then of course you've got townhouse and manufactured. So whatever matches your listing, builder product. So we're going to say no, because we would only enter yes here if this was a new construction, pre-construction, or under construction listing. And if it was a new construction, pre-construction, or under construction listing, then we would also be required to enter the builder's name, because it is not, this house has been lived in already. We don't have to enter that information. If you're dealing with a condo, you would place the building number here, total number of floors in the property. That's pretty self-explanatory. Total number of floors in the building. So it's a required field. You're just going to enter 1 when you have a single family home. But if you've got, a condo that you're entering, it's a 5-story condo. So maybe you're on the 2nd floor, you're still going to be entering 5, because there's 5 floors in that building. Sometimes you can have a condo that has 2 or 3 stories. So you would want to enter how many stories are in floors, how many stories or floors are in the property itself. Unit floor. So if you are working with that condo, you are going to enter, for example, if we're on the 2nd floor, we would enter 2. If we're on the 5th floor, we'd enter 5. So I am going to enter a 0 here, because I'm doing a single family home. And so that it doesn't apply. So I'm entering 0. Units in the building, just 1, single family home. Units in complex, 1, single family home. Again, these refer to condos, but they're required fields. So we want to make sure that we're entering something to satisfy that requirement. The legal description is already filled in for us because it filled from realist tax. And right down here, the section, range, block number, all of this sort of census tract information, all of that automatically populated, once again, because we filled from realist tax. So this is really helpful. We don't have to deal with this when we automatically fill from realist tax. When you're entering a single family home, your legal unit number is 0. Okay. And now I'm just going to scroll back up to the top of the screen, and we're going to talk about the status type. So this is where I'm going to address the new construction question. So if I'm entering a new construction listing, there are some rules I have to keep in mind. So pre-construction, when you're entering a pre-construction listing, the only way that you can enter that pre-construction listing using the residential input rather than the lot and land form is if you have a building permit already issued for the construction to begin. If you do not have the building permit for the pre-construction to begin, then what you have is a lot and land listing. You cannot enter it as pre-construction. Under construction, the ground is broken and they've started the build. And new construction, it's completed. It's ready to be moved into. The certificate of occupancy has been issued, but it's never been occupied. to enter as new construction and ready to move into, right? And then, of course, resale property, and that's what we're dealing with. This has been owned by someone before, and they are reselling it. You're going to enter your list price here. You don't use decimal points or commas when you're putting in your list price. So you want to be really careful and check and double check when you enter your list price. So I entered $699.9. Now, those nines, psychologically, we tend to think, and this is just a tip. This is not a rule. You don't have to pay any attention to me at all on this. I'm just going to give you a little tip. $699.9. Those nines are very psychologically appealing because we haven't hit the $700,000 mark. However, when agents are searching for those listings that are between, let's just say, $700,000 and $800,000, guess what? Your listing is not going to show up in those search results. Bedrooms did not automatically populate, but you just want to select whatever applies to the home. You see full baths automatically populated, but half baths did not. I'm going to enter a 0. Property doesn't have any half baths, but I have to satisfy the fact that that is a required field. Living square footage automatically populated, total square footage automatically populated. And then we get to ceiling fans, and that's where, for the first time, my profile sheet that I took with me on my listing appointment and sat down with my seller and filled out, that's where that's going to come in handy. So we come to furnished, and of course, this one's going to be unfurnished. Cable available. That doesn't mean necessarily that the cable is connected. It just means that it is available to be connected. Is there an elevator in the property? Garage spaces. This is a required field. If there are no garage spaces, I'm going to enter a 0. I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 here. And then garage description. Once I enter information here in garage spaces, garage description is required. Had I entered that there were no garage spaces, then I could skip right past the garage description. It would no longer be required. For example, carport spaces is 0, so I don't have to enter a carport description because there is none. And then we come to rear exposure. And you may think, well, geez, I have no clue. Well, it's really easy to figure that out. And while you're figuring out the rear exposure, another required field or set of required fields are your lot dimensions. The lot back, the front, left, and right. So we're going to go up here to this map. Now, anytime you come into this listing form, this map is never going to be populated. It's never, ever going to be populated. But if you click on get latitude and longitude from address, you'll see that the map went ahead and populated for us. That's all fine and good, but we need to know the rear exposure and we need to know those lot dimensions. So in order to get those, I'm going to click on set latitude and longitude manually. This box is going to open. I see my property is pinned. I'm going to click on that property if it will let me. There we go. There we go. So you see, once I clicked on the property, it zoomed right in and it's giving me my lot dimensions. So I've got 80 across the front, 80 across the back, 125 on both sides. I can zoom out and your map, north, south, east, west, right? So our rear exposure here is what? It's west. And I can see that just by looking at my map here. So another thing that's important to note for you here, I can click on other parcels in this map. And the reason I might want to do that is when I click on this parcel, And as I mentioned, this database does tend to move a little slow. I'm verifying the address, right? Verifying that address, and I can click on lot dimensions. Double clicking does the same thing, but you can click on lot dimensions. And I think it's a good idea to do it from there, just because you're verifying the address. Because if it's not in the correct address, if that pin did not drop correctly, you have the ability to place it correctly by simply clicking right here where it says place new pin. You can click on that, then you can come over here and grab that pin and you can move it to the correct address. The correct placement for a pin is going to be on the center of the lot or the center of the structure that's on the property. So once you've done that, you verified everything. We've got our lot dimensions. What were they again? Because I'm going to have to enter them, 80 by 125. So I'm going to click done, and I've got that westerly exposure. So now I can just scroll down here. I can enter my west rear exposure. We've got year built, 99, automatically populated from the tax records. The next section that we're coming to is pets. If there are pet limits, you must enter whatever rules apply for that subdivision or condo. Your lot size in acres automatically populated from realist tax, and then we're entering our lot dimensions. So we remember that it's 80 front and back, and on both sides it was 125. You're not always going to have a square or a rectangular lot, but it will give you the lot dimensions. Sometimes if it's kind of like offset, you'll have to add those dimensions together because of the way it shows you on the lot. And you'll see what I mean when that happens. But you might have to do a little addition to get the total. This is where you would place your virtual tour. So if you're adding a virtual tour to your listing, you have 2 places for virtual tour links. You can use both of them. Just make sure that you are using an unbranded virtual tour. Simply paste the URL or link, if you will, to your virtual tour right here. The owner name is required, automatically populates from the public records. If you run into a situation where you are listing a property where the owner's name is withheld, sometimes you will find that. You can actually enter here, withheld, ownership description, and this is just where you're deciding what type of property it is. You notice that schools are not required, and you might want to even check with your broker. Some brokers will tell you not to enter the schools. If you do enter the schools, be very, very sure that you're entering the correct schools. Moving on, we come to measurements. So this is the living area, and it's asking us where we got this information. Because we pulled it from realist tax, which is pulling from the public records, we're going to select the property appraiser's office. And it's going to be the same thing with all of these. So the total area, once again, the property appraiser's office, the lot dimensions. Because we used the map, property appraiser's office, of course, the lot size came from the property appraiser's office. So that's it for the general tab. And now we're moving back to the top of the form, and we're going to go to rooms and sizes. Now, I'm not going to take the time to do this, but you should. So you'll simply select the room. You're going to enter the length and the width. And then to add more rooms, you'll click more. If you accidentally click more too many times and you got this line sitting here empty, make sure that you go ahead and click delete to get rid of that, because if you leave one sitting there empty, you won't be able to make your listing active, because once you add that, then it becomes required. The next tab is the features tab. There are not enough hours in the day to really go through this online because there are so many more important things that I really want to focus on with you guys. But all you're doing here is going through these required, you can see the ones that are required and the ones that are not, and adding everything that applies to your listing. And we'll go to that. So tax bill, this is going to be the total tax bill for the previous year. And you see that it was automatically populated from real estate tax. If you are in a special tax district, you will enter that special tax district here. If you are, you'll know because it will be in the public records, but you do have to disclose it here. And then your tax description. If the current owner utilized the homestead exemption, for example, or any of these others that apply, maybe they didn't use it as a homestead because they are snowbirds and they live somewhere else part of the time as their primary address. Again, just whatever applies. HOA description, is it mandatory or voluntary? So you want to be sure that you are entering these fields completely. Mandatory HOA, yes or no? So we're going to say it's mandatory, yes. The master HOA fee, you want to enter whatever that master HOA fee is, and you also want to enter how often it's paid. Very, very important about HOA fees. So we're not only entering how much the fees are, but how often they're paid. If there are there any mandatory club fees? Condo fees, well, we have the HOA fee. If we were entering a condo, we could skip all of that and come down here to condo fee. Required fields, so I have to go ahead and enter that 0 because even though it doesn't apply to me, I have to enter that. If there's a rec lease fee, and then how often they're paid. Any other special assessment fees, how much are they? How often are they paid? Any other fees, how much are they and how often are they paid? What is the association management's phone number? You want to enter that as well. And of course, you've got all of these other fees. These are all required fees. And sometimes you're going to have these, a one-time mandatory club fee. Sometimes you are required to join the club, the country club. You buy a home in a community. One-time land lease fee, one-time rec fee, one-time other fees, anything that you see here. And always there's multiple fields here. So you just have to see what applies. A transfer fee, that's a transfer of ownership from the current owner to the new owner. If there is an application fee, maybe there's a $125 application fee, you can enter that. Some of them, the ones with country clubs and that, are going to have a annual minimum food and beverage fee. Leasing on new ownership, the property currently being leased, yes or no. If the property can be leased, yes or no. Some developments have restrictions on how often a property can be leased. So maybe they can be leased twice a year, so it would be a 6-month lease, or maybe they only let annual leases or minimum days. So you'll be in other areas where you can have the weekly rental. That would apply. Land lease fee, how often it's paid. Is it subject to FERPTA? If you do not know what FERPTA is, you can click on that information bubble, the little circle with the question mark, and that is going to tell you. FERPTA stands for Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. So then, of course, you would answer yes or no accordingly. Is it subject to a lease? Currently, no. But if it were currently subject to a lease, what are the terms of the lease? Is it an annual lease or a short-term lease? And what is the expiration date of that lease? When we go to compensation, it is very important to remember, you see that $sign and that percentage sign. You have to enter one or the other. You can't just say one. You have to enter that percentage sign or that $sign. You cannot put a certain percentage amount minus a dollar amount. That is not allowed in any of these fields. You can't do that. These are blanket unilateral offers of compensation, and you have to enter exactly the compensation that is to be paid. I provided you with a document in your handouts, MLS Listing Input Key Definitions, that will explain the various types of compensation that you see here. Just because we're running out of time disclosing the total commission, you're only disclosing what you are paying the broker that brings a buyer. If you are paying a bonus, you can enter it there and then describe that bonus. Variable rate commission. A lot of people misunderstand what a variable rate commission is. Very hopefully simply stated, a variable rate commission is a situation where a listing agent agrees with the seller that if they also bring the buyer to the sale, they will take a reduced rate of commission. So it doesn't have anything to do with the split whatsoever, because if there's a variable rate commission and it's going to be utilized, then there is no split. So the variable rate commission is simply an agreement that the listing agent has with the seller that if they also find the buyer, they will accept a reduced rate of commission. That has to be disclosed because it does put the listing agent in an advantage situation in a multiple offer scenario where you have multiple bids on a home. You can have somebody bid a lower amount and still lose the house because of the fact that the listing agent found a buyer that was willing to pay less money, but because of the reduced rate of commission, the seller would net higher proceeds. So you can see that it would put that listing agent in an advantage if they also bring the buyer. So if there's a variable rate commission in place, you must disclose that. Joint agency is when two brokers share a listing. If the property is in foreclosure, if it's bank owned, real estate owned, you need to disclose that here. If you have a short sale, you're going to disclose that here. And if there's going to be a reduced rate of commission paid, then you would disclose that reduced commission rate as a result of the short sale here. Is it an auction property? Yes or no? And then are we listing the property on the internet? Do you want the address of the property to be on the internet? Probably so, but sometimes people say no. Do we want to allow VOW, that's virtual office websites, to blog, that's to write articles about our listing? A virtual office website, these are the iBuyers. These are the real estate brokerages that do business strictly online. They do not have a brick and mortar. So you typically talk about them in terms of iBuyers. Do you want to allow those same types of websites to place an automated valuation model, an AVM? Yes or no? It's up to you. You might not care. And then broker reciprocity. This means, are you going to allow other brokers to show your listing on their websites? If you click broker reciprocity is also known as IDX, Internet Data Exchange, and it's simply an agreement between brokers that allows them to advertise one another's listings on the internet without having to sign anything. And then, of course, the site. So homes.com. ListHub is the syndication portal for all of the gazillion of consumer-facing real estate search sites out there on the internet. And then, of course, Naples area, that's part of the Naples board. Do you want to allow that on their website? And then realtor.com. Your MLS ID number will automatically populate when you're entering the listing. If you have a co-listing agent, you can enter their MLS ID number here, and all of their name and office information will automatically populate. Are showing appointments required? If they are, And then, of course, we'll get to that in just a minute. If you are required to enter your showing instructions over here. What is the expiration date of the listing? Of course, you would enter whatever your agreement, your listing agreement states. And showing appointment phone number. Is there a phone number that needs to be entered in order to show the listing? You may be using showing time, and if you are, that's perfectly fine. You will be setting that up after the fact, so you can leave that blank, but you want to go ahead and enter any other showing instructions that you have. If you're going to be doing any target marketing, you would indicate that. You'll find these definitions in the handout that I sent you guys. Listing type. Again, you'll find these definitions. I sent you guys several handouts, and in the listing definitions, you'll find each one of these. You're typically going to have exclusive right to sell. Is there a sign on the property with the seller's contact? Not your contact info, but the seller's contact info. The only time you would be saying yes here is if you're entering a limited service listing where the seller is paying you to do nothing but enter the listing into the MLS and maintain the listing in the MLS. Then you might find that the seller's contact information would be on that sign. Under most other circumstances, that's going to be a no. But if it is a limited service listing and that seller would need to be contacted, then you would enter yes here. And you would probably also want to put their phone number up here, right? But that, again, that's a limited service listing. Listing broker will be available on contract presentations and negotiations. Probably true, but you have to enter whatever applies. If it's a limited service agreement, maybe and maybe not. It just depends on what the terms of your limited service agreement are. And then listing broker will perform post-contract services. Yes or no, just depending on the type of agreement that you have with your seller. Then we come into remarks. So property information are public remarks. You have a handout that gives you some very important things to keep in mind when you are entering property information. You do not ever put anything that would brand the listing in any way. Not your name, not your phone number, not your email address, your web address, not open house information. You're not allowed to say anything about an open house information. You don't want to say anything about how to access the property. This is all public facing information. If the property is vacant, you never, ever, ever put that in the public remarks section. So check out the document that I provided to you guys for listing remarks, do's and don'ts. And then, of course, you've got your confidential remarks, do's and don'ts. So this is where you're going to be entering, if you said see remarks, you're going to be entering that. If you have to talk to them about access and confidential remarks, then you can do that here with some limitations. But if you're using showing time or some other showing service, that's going to be your best option to disclose there. And then, of course, turn by turn directions. You notice it says directions to the property only. That's typically from a major intersection or thoroughfare. No phone numbers, no URLs. Don't say Google Maps or MapQuest or anything like that. Use GPS. Don't say that stuff. Just either enter turn by turn directions from a major intersection, or just it'd be better to leave it blank than to do the other. So now we're ready to submit the listing. So we can go to validate. We can go back over here to status if we want. And when I go to click on active and I go to submit the listing, I got all these errors. I knew that was going to happen. What I want to show you guys is when you see that, for example, on features, if you scroll through this document, you're going to find it's on the field. You're going to have that red exclamation point right here, bath description. I didn't enter anything there. So if there are more, I can scroll through there to see if I missed anything else. So waterfront, actually, yeah, this is a canal property, and windows and water. So whatever applies. But when they're all satisfied, that exclamation point will go away. So let's just pretend for a moment that I did set this listing to active. When it comes time to change the status of the listing, you'll come in here to My Matrix and then select My Listings. And then, of course, your listing would be active. And there are no active listings here. So I'm going to have to use incoming listings to show you this. But you would select the listing that you're wanting to change the status of. You can also manage photos from here as well, but we're just going to go ahead and click on Edit. And then we can select pending or pending with contingencies or whichever applies. You can also manage the photos from here and manage your showing instructions and showing time from here, and any supplements that you've uploaded with the listing. And again, because this is this particular database, there's a couple of things I can't show you, but you will find them in the course notes. You can set up open houses from here. When you click on any of these, they're all self-explanatory and the required fields are there. If you are entering one of those out of area listings, the selling agent ID is always going to be that code right there. That's what you would enter for an out of area agent, FGCNL. You want to make sure that you're coming in and changing your listing statuses in a timely manner. You have 3 business days to change the listing status to pending. You have 3 business days to change the listing status to sold. If you go past those days, you won't even be able to access the listing. You'll have to contact us in order to make those changes for you. I sent you guys the top 10 violations in the handouts. Please go over those. It will help you to avoid them.